Thomas the Tank Engine and his friends are iconic for many reasons, but a big one is their design. Since the very first book in the Railway series, the look of the characters carried a specific and unique aesthetic. Wilbert Awdry, the creator, ensured that all the characters he created had a real-life basis for the illustrators to use. Despite being based on real vehicles in the real world, the characters retained a slightly simpler, more fully proportioned and vibrant appearance compared to their real-life counterpart, making each character look enchanting in the beautiful landscapes. Every character introduced as the books progressed looked iconic and memorable, with the illustrations themselves later becoming icons of the brand. When you think of the characters, a look similar to the books is envisioned, which is a testament to how well designed each character was. The design of each character reflected their personality and what they represented. Gordon was big, sleek, and entitled, reflecting his roots, job, and personality. Duck was green, had his GWR initials, and looked proud, again reflecting his roots, job, and personality. Boko was based on a diesel that had mechanical trouble, was big, and looked composed, reflecting what he represented, how other characters viewed him, and his personality. All three are perfect examples of well-designed Thomas characters that are still popular and relevant to fans to this day. You can easily look at a character and identify what they're like, making the ensemble cast of the Railway series rich, fun, and developed. These character designs from the books were translated into physical models for the TV series in 1984. The models retain their iconic designs, staying faithful to the original illustrations. Their simpler locomotive look, fully proportioned bodies, and vibrant colors were carried over to keep the iconic characters still recognizable. The restrictions of the model-making process and a consistent production team in each season allowed the designs of each character to maintain the same aesthetic and iconic look over the years, helping each character's appearance to be memorable. All the characters felt like they were from the same world, visually complementing one another. When the series moved away from the books and introduced its own characters in Season 5, the new characters still adhered to the established aesthetic and fit seamlessly into the established world. However, the aesthetic of the model era of the franchise took a shift starting from Thomas and the Magic Railroad. The models adopted matte paint instead of the traditional glossy paint used in the first 5 seasons, making the world and its characters appear less storybook-like and more dull, realistic, and industrial. Despite looking more like the real world and grittier, the island of Sodor and its characters seem drained of their beauty, ambition, charm, color, and ability to present life and its characters as a visual art piece. Every character introduced in the following season started to have more realistic proportions and grittier textures. These designs were in no way terrible and are loved by fans, but despite being more detailed, they were not as iconic as the original cast. The finer details of rivets, thinner and more complicated linings, and diverse color palettes made them more overwhelming to the eyes compared to the main cast. They were now becoming over-designed. The more advanced model-making technology from the 2000s compared to the 80s also contributed to these more realistic designs, but model-making still had its restrictions. And for the rest of the model series, despite characters having more complicated designs and realistic proportions, they still all fit into the world of Thomas. When the switch to CGI happened, the main cast and multiple secondary characters were carefully translated into CGI renders, exact copies of their model counterparts, thus maintaining the character design aesthetic. However, with CGI being more flexible and having no restrictions of physical models, it meant the designs of the characters were now limitless with details and able to be copied and pasted, leading to even more complicated yet bland designs. New characters started to use other characters' models with new colors slapped on, and the old aesthetic full of charm became a distant memory. The characters were now just any random cool locomotive the production team found on Google, picked for the gimmick rather than reflecting the character they were supposed to represent. Let's take Paxton, for example. He's undoubtedly one of the better CGI characters, but does his real-life basis, color palette, size, and face reflect his roots, job, and personality? New characters were now just NPCs in the Thomas universe, often forgotten within a couple of seasons. The characters whose designs rarely did reflect who they were or had meaning are coincidentally considered to be some of the better CGI characters, almost as if there's a connection.
No way!
The new aesthetic design was fully evident with old characters returning and being translated into CGI. Despite the first set of CGI renders being careful recreations of the models, the later CGI returning characters such as Duck, Donald, Douglas, and Oliver were now more or less just inspired by their original designs, now including more complex shapes, color palettes, and proportions, highlighting the transformation of the character design process the show had taken. It had gone to the point where new characters were just an exact copy of their real-life bases with interesting colors, patterns, and a face slapped on. Characters in the design process were now being designed to be just another colorful trait with a face, rather than an iconic new character. The use of the same character models, assets, and details also made each character less and less unique. Even every single new female character had the same eye design. The designs of new characters had become bland, overwhelming, and drained of charm. This change was so significant and noticeable that the main cast now looked completely out of place next to new characters, leading the production team to add more detail to the main cast, such as rivets and handrails, albeit looking like an eyesore. The once iconic characters had now become charmless, overwhelming eyesores with an undefined aesthetic. This doesn't mean every modern character looked terrible. The CGI series had some amazing renders and wonderful looking new characters, but they were always a bit too much, trying too hard to look realistic. Merchandise was streamlining toy designs and featuring less and less detail, and the fact that the show started to take on a more cartoonish and unrealistic tone, the characters now contradict the exact franchise, world, and story they were a part of. One of the big pictures and goals to even get the original TV series made was that it wasn't going to look cheap. It was going to do everything in its power to look good and deliver quality content. They pushed technology to the model-making limits all the way back in the 80s just to bring these characters to life. Every character, whether a main or a random secondary character, had a lot of painful and tedious effort put in to ensure they were the best they could be. If anything, the Thomas franchise has proven on a visual standpoint that sometimes less is more. If they had kept the characters simpler, more fully proportioned, and less overwhelming, the characters would have had their own identity, be their own character, be only one of a kind, to be iconic.